Reborn, I just sat my exam. He told me to flunk it for his son. He failed by 2 points. The first thing I heard when I came back to life was the scratch of my pencil against paper. Not thunder. Not a hospital monitor.
Not my mother crying.
Just graphite dragging across the final answer booklet of the Northbridge National Scholars Examination, forming a sentence I remembered writing 10 years before my death. Therefore, the policy fails not because the budget is insufficient, but because the model assumes equal access where unequal transport already determines outcome. I froze so suddenly my pencil tip snapped. The sound cracked through the examination hall like a tiny gunshot. Rows of students bent over desks beneath cold fluorescent lights. Invigilators paced between aisles. The wall clock above the stage read 11:48 a.m. 12 minutes remained. My right hand trembled over the paper. My candidate number sat at the top of the booklet, 4172. My name was not written anywhere because the final exam was supposed to be blind marked.
Supposed to be.
I looked down at the page, at the answer I had just completed, at the neat diagrams and citations and calculations filling the previous sections, and my lungs forgot how to work. I was not in the stairwell of the old admissions building with blood in my mouth and a rejection letter in my coat pocket. I was 18 again. I had just sat the exam that could change my life. And in less than half an hour, Dr. Malcolm Vey would take me into the records room and tell me to flunk it for his son. I gripped the edge of the desk until my knuckles hurt. The hall swam, then steadied. There were the tall windows with rain sliding down them in silver lines. There were the blue banners hanging from the rafters. Merit.
Service.
Excellence. There was the smell of cheap erasers, damp coats, instant coffee from the invigilator's table, and fear. There was Mara Quinn in the row ahead of me, chewing the end of her pen exactly, as she had in my first life. There was Julian Vey 3 rows to the left, Dr. Vey's son, leaning back with the lazy panic of someone who expected rescue even from mathematics. He was handsome in the way expensive tutoring can polish mediocrity into confidence. Dark hair, perfect blazer, school crest stitched in gold, watch worth more than my mother's rent. His answer booklet was half empty. I knew, because I had seen it before. I knew because in my first life, while the rest of us wrote until our fingers cramped, Julian spent the last 20 minutes staring at the ceiling and tapping his pencil against his teeth. Later, after I deliberately flunked my essay section, he scraped the final scholarship seat by a margin so narrow the committee called it a testament to holistic promise. I learned much later that he had passed because my score dropped beneath his. In this life, if my paper stayed whole, he would fail by 2 points. 2 points. Such a small number for a life to turn on. In my first life, Dr. Malcolm Vey made it sound smaller than mercy. He said the Northbridge Scholars Program was not only about exam performance. It was about legacy, leadership, continuity. He said Julian had been under extraordinary pressure since his mother died. He said I was brilliant enough to find another way, while Julian needed this one door to stay open. He said if I quietly weakened my final response, no one would know. He would see that I received a regional mentorship next year. He would recommend me personally. He would remember my maturity. I was 18, poor, fatherless, the daughter of a cleaner who washed floors in the very academy whose exam hall I sat in. I had grown up watching people like Dr. Vey decide which children were promising and which were hardworking. I had mistaken his private attention for proof that I belonged. So when he said, "A gifted girl like you can recover from one lost exam," I believed him. I crossed out my strongest conclusion. I replaced my policy model with a vague paragraph. I left 2 questions blank. I walked out shaking, convinced I had done something noble. Noble. The word tasted rotten now. In the life that followed, Julian won the final seat. He entered Northbridge Academy, became a public policy darling, rose through ministries, and eventually authored the emergency transport reforms that failed during the winter floods. My mother died waiting for an ambulance rerouted by a model that ignored rural road closures. My appeal letters went unanswered because I was nobody. I spent years piecing together the exam records, the score adjustments, the scholarship minutes, the quiet pressure Dr. Vey had placed on students before me. When I finally found proof, an archived raw score sheet showing I had been ranked first before my voluntary incomplete response, I went to the old admissions building during a storm to retrieve the certified copy. Someone followed me. I remembered a hand on my shoulder near the stairwell. I remembered falling. I remembered my head striking the marble step. I remembered seeing, absurdly, a shoe print in rainwater beside my face. Then nothing, until the pencil broke in my hand. "Candidate 4172, whispered the invigilator beside me. "Do you require a replacement pencil?" My throat was dry. I looked up. Mrs. Alder. Gray hair. Square glasses. The only invigilator who had smiled at me that morning in both lives. In my first life, after the exam, she found me crying in the corridor and asked if I was ill.
Elite.
Later, when I tried to investigate, I discovered she had retired and moved away. This time, her eyes held mild concern, nothing more. She did not know she was standing inside a second chance. "Yes, please," I whispered. She placed a pencil on my desk. Her fingers covered the desk number for half a second, and under them I noticed something I had missed in the first life. The corner of my answer booklet had a tiny red, near the staple.
Dog.
Not blind. Not fully. I looked around quickly. Julian's booklet had a green. Mara's had none. My pulse sharpened. Dr. Vey had known which paper was mine before the marking. Of course he had. Blind systems are only blind when powerful people do not need them to see. The last 12 minutes became the longest of my life. I did not cross anything out. I rewrote the broken pencil line cleanly. I added a footnote to the transport model explaining why rural response times must be weighted by access, not population density alone. I answered the final short response question I had left blank in the first timeline, the one worth exactly 3 marks. I still remembered the answer, because regret makes excellent flashcards. When the bell rang, the hall erupted in sighs, chairs scraping, papers closing, suppressed groans. One quiet sob from the back row. "Pens down," called the chief invigilator. "Booklets close." I placed my pencil on the desk and rested both hands flat, as if the paper might try to run away from me. An invigilator collected the answer booklets row by row. When Mrs. Alder reached mine, I said softly, "Could you initial the collection line in front of me?" She blinked. "Pardon. For my own record. I noticed some booklets have color dots, and I want to confirm mine was collected sealed." Her eyebrows rose by a millimeter. "Not much. Enough." "Of course," she said. She took my booklet, checked the candidate number, sealed it in the stack envelope, and initialed the collection sheet. "There you are." Her voice remained neutral, but her eyes flicked once toward the red. She had seen it too. Students began filing toward the doors. Julian stood slowly, stretching as if exams were a minor inconvenience his future would apologize for later. His friend Theo clapped him on the back. "How bad?" Theo asked. Julian laughed. "Bad enough that father will say character matters." The first time, I had heard that and hated him vaguely. Now the sentence landed like a confession with no shame attached. I gathered my bag, slid my candidate admission card into my coat pocket, and turned on the small recording app on my phone. In this year, my phone was an old cracked model my mother bought secondhand from one of the families she cleaned for. It barely held charge, but it recorded audio. I had used it to capture lectures from free exam workshops. In my first life, I left it turned off when Dr. Vey approached me. This time, the red recording icon blinked beneath my thumb as I slipped the phone into the inside pocket of my coat. "Miss Elian." Dr. Malcolm Vey's voice came from the corridor before I saw him. I knew that voice too well. Warm, low, trained by decades of assemblies, donor dinners, and interviews about educational fairness. He stood beside the trophy cabinet, wearing a dark suit and the Northbridge crest pin. Silver hair, kind eyes, hands folded, a portrait of institutional benevolence. In my first life, that face was the nearest thing I had to a gate opening. "May I speak with you for a moment?" he asked. My name was Leora Elian. He said it correctly, which had once made me grateful, because teachers often did not. "I need to call my mother," I said. His smile held. "This will only take a moment." Behind him, Julian passed, saw us, and looked away too quickly. That small movement sent ice through me. Julian had known. Maybe not everything. Enough. Dr. Vey gestured toward the side hallway leading to the admissions offices. Please. I walked with him, but I did not follow blindly. I glanced back. Mrs. Alder stood near the hall doors, collection sheet in hand. I caught her eye and touched 2 fingers to my coat pocket. It was not a signal we had agreed on. It was the desperate language of someone hoping another woman understood danger without being told the whole story. Her expression did not change, but she did not turn away. Dr. Vey led me to the records room, not his office. Of course. His office had windows. The records room had shelves, cabinets, old exam files, and a door that closed with a soft pneumatic sigh. He did not lock it. Men like him rarely lock doors. They prefer rooms where obedience makes locks unnecessary. First, he said, leaning against the edge of the records table, you should know you performed exceptionally today. My heart beat once, hard. The papers haven't been marked. He smiled, indulgent. One develops an eye. For candidate numbers? His smile paused. For talent? I said nothing. Silence unsettled him faster than tears. In my first life, I had filled every pause with gratitude. Thank you, sir. I hope so, sir. I tried my best, sir. This time, I let the shelves listen. Dr. Vey folded his hands. Leora, I have followed your progress for some time. Your scholarship essay. Your regional debate score. Your teacher recommendations. You are extraordinary. Thank you. And, because you are extraordinary, I can speak to you frankly. There it was. Praise as a key turning in the lock. The Northbridge Scholars Program is more than marks. It is a lifelong network. A public commitment. A family in many ways. Family. Powerful institutions love that word when they want rights without responsibility. He walked to a cabinet and ran one finger along the labels. My son Julian sat today. I know. He has not had an easy year. I'm sorry. The words came automatically because grief deserves manners even when used as a weapon. His wife had died 2 years earlier. That was real. In my first life, he laid that grief before me like a wounded animal and asked me not to step on it. Julian has been raised in the shadow of this academy, Dr. Vey said. People assume doors open easily for him, but expectation can be its own cage. I thought of my mother cleaning classrooms at 5 a.m. before I came to sit in them for exam workshops at 9. I thought of cages with velvet cushions. What does that have to do with me? He sighed softly, as if my intelligence saddened him when it refused to cooperate. There is one open national seat this year. The others are already allocated by region and foundation pairing. Your performance today may place you ahead of him. Then I should be ahead of him. The sentence came out before he could shape the next lie. Dr. Vey's eyes flickered. Marks are not destiny. No. But this is an exam. And exams can be crude instruments. Then why is Julian sitting 1? His expression cooled by 1 degree. Because process matters. I almost laughed. Does it? The room tightened around us. He studied me more carefully now, adjusting to a version of me he had not met in the first life. You are sharp today. I just finished an exam. And perhaps the pressure has made you defensive. There it was. The first brick in the wall he would build if I refused. Emotional. Defensive. Overwrought. What are you asking me to do, Dr. Vey? I asked. Plainly. Plainly did not suit him. He preferred velvet. Still, he must have sensed the minutes slipping away, the collection envelopes moving toward secure storage, the machine beginning without his adjustment. There is still a discretionary review stage before marking finalization, he said. Candidates may submit clarifications, withdrawals, or corrections if they believe an answer misrepresents their intention. I knew. In my first life, he handed me the form. Candidate Self-Revision Statement. A mechanism meant for students who accidentally wrote in the wrong section or wanted to withdraw a question after illness. He used it as a knife and let me hold the handle. If you were to submit a correction indicating that your final essay section was incomplete or speculative, he continued, the markers would be required to discount it. Not fail you entirely. Simply reduce the weighting. You would remain an excellent candidate, but likely outside the immediate national seat. My mouth went dry. Hearing it again was like watching someone reach into my chest for an organ they had already stolen once. You want me to flunk my own paper? No, his voice sharpened. I want you to show maturity. For Julian. For the program. For your son. His eyes hardened. My son has devoted his life to Northbridge. I devoted mine to getting here. You can find other paths, can he? The question landed harder than I expected. Dr. Vey straightened. Julian's aptitude is not in question. His booklet was half empty. Silence. Not long. Enough. You were looking at another candidate's paper? He was tapping his pencil for 20 minutes. Stress affects people differently. Apparently, so does preparation.
His face changed then.
Not dramatically. The kindness drained first. Be careful, Miss Elian. The exact words. The exact tone.
My phone recorded them.
My spine felt cold and straight.
Why?
I asked. Because promising students can be misread when ambition outruns judgment. By whom? By the people asked to trust them. He moved closer, lowering his voice. Northbridge can lift a life. It can also decide a candidate is not yet suited to its culture. Culture. Another velvet word. In my first life, after I submitted the self-revision form, Dr. Vey wrote a note praising my humility. When I later asked why I had not received the regional mentorship he promised, the admissions office said my file reflected uncertain competitive temperament. The same sacrifice he requested became the flaw he recorded. This time, I wanted him to say more. What happens if I don't submit the correction? I asked. You risk becoming known as a girl who had one excellent day and mistook it for entitlement. And if I do, you become known as someone with perspective. Would you put that in writing? He laughed once, softly. You are not in a position to request terms. Then I'm not in a position to accept them. His face went still. For the first time, I saw the man behind the academy pin. Not a grieving father. Not a mentor. A gatekeeper who had mistaken keys for moral authority. You think you are being brave, he said.
No, irraplia.
I think I am being marked. He stepped away from the table and opened a drawer. Inside lay a stack of self-revision forms. He took one out and placed it between us. Take the form. Think for 5 minutes. You are young enough to confuse refusal with strength. I am trying to spare you consequences.
No.
You are trying to move them onto me. The words surprised him. They surprised me too. They sounded older than 18. Death had a way of aging the tongue. Dr. Vey's eyes narrowed. You will regret making an enemy of this institution. I already did. I almost said. Instead, I said, I am not submitting that form. He pushed it closer. Then I will note your unwillingness to engage in reflective correction. Please do. I looked toward the door. And please include that you offered the correction to lower my score for Julian's benefit. His hand stopped on the paper. Leave, he said.
No worms. No velvet. Just command.
I took the form anyway. His eyebrows rose. For evidence, I said. Then I opened the door. Mrs. Alder stood at the far end of the corridor, pretending to adjust the exam envelope log on a clipboard. She had not left. Her gaze moved from my face to the paper in my hand to Dr. Vey, behind me. Something in her expression became quiet and dangerous. I walked past her without stopping, afraid that if I spoke, my voice would break. Outside the building, rain had softened to mist. Students clustered under awnings, laughing too loudly from post-exam shock. Julian stood with his friends near the steps. He looked at me, then at the records room hallway behind me. Did father speak to you? He asked. Not, are you okay? Not, what happened? Did father speak to you? Yes, I said. His throat moved. And I looked at him, this boy whose future had once been built from the peace of mind I handed over. You should hope your own paper is enough. His face whitened. My mother arrived 20 minutes later in the old blue sedan she used to drive between cleaning jobs. She was still wearing her work shoes. Her hair was tied back, her hands rough from chemicals, her eyes searching my face before I even opened the car door. In my first life, I hid everything from her. I told her the exam was hard. I told her I did my best. When the rejection came, she blamed herself for not affording better tutors. That guilt lived in our house like a third person for years. This time, I slid into the passenger seat and said, Dr. Vey asked me to lower my score so Julian could pass. My mother's hands froze on the steering wheel. The wipers dragged mist across the glass. For a moment, she said nothing. Then she turned off the engine. Tell me exactly. So I did. Every word, every threat, the form, the recording, the red dot on my booklet. Mrs. Alder. Julian's look. My mother listened without interrupting, which meant she was angrier than I had ever seen her. When I finished, she held out her hand. Give me the phone. Why? Because I clean their offices, she said. Not my brain. We did not go home. My mother drove to the public library 3 streets away, parked under a dripping plane tree, and made 3 copies of the self-revision form using coins from the ashtray. Then we emailed the recording to ourselves, my history teacher Ms. Rao, and a legal aid address my mother had once used for housing dispute. I watched her type with 2 fingers, slow and ferocious. Subject: Northbridge exam pressure evidence. Mum, I said, voice shaking. What if this ruins everything? She stopped typing and looked at me. My mother was small, barely 5 feet, with tired eyes and a spine no institution had managed to rent. Baby, she said, he asked you to ruin everything and call it maturity. I started crying then. Not delicately. Not in the way scholarship essays describe hardship as character building. I cried like an exhausted child who had been given permission to stop protecting the adult who threatened her. My mother pulled me against her shoulder, and the library printer hummed beside us like a tiny witness. That evening, the exam board's secure portal updated. Candidate answer booklets received. Candidate 4172. Complete. No self-revision submitted. I took a screenshot. Then another. Then I printed it because my mother had decided paper was harder to gaslight than memory. At 8:04 p.m., Ms. Rao called. She had taught me history at the public high school that Northbridge recruiters visited for diversity photos and forgot by graduation. Leora, she said, I listened to the recording. Am I in trouble?
No.
But you need adults in rooms before he creates a different story.
Who? Me.
Your mother. Legal aid if they respond. And Mrs. Alder if she'll speak. I don't know if she will. She already emailed me. I sat up so fast my chair scraped the floor. What? She found my school address from your recommendation file. She said she witnessed you entering and leaving the records corridor, observed irregular booklet markings, and initialed your collection sheet. My chest opened. A witness. A real one. In my first life, I had no one but memory, and memory had been treated like a poor girl's imagination. She helped, I whispered. Ms. Rao's voice softened. People help more often when they see you refusing to disappear. The next 2 days were a war fought through polite emails. Dr. Vey did not contact me directly. He was too experienced. Instead, the Northbridge admissions office sent a message saying my conduct after the exam had raised procedural concerns and requesting a meeting to clarify candidate intent. Ms. Rao replied on my behalf, copying my mother, legal aid, and the exam board's independent compliance officer. She used phrases that sounded boring and therefore dangerous. Improper influence, candidate score manipulation, breach of blind marking protocol, preservation of raw scripts, request for independent review. Dr. Vey's office then replied that no accusation should be inferred from a pastoral conversation after a stressful exam. Pastoral. I laughed so hard I almost dropped the phone. My mother did not laugh. She printed the email and wrote lie in the margin with a red pen. Mom. What? That copy might become evidence.
Good.
They should know. On the 3rd day, Northbridge agreed to an independent marking hold. All candidate scripts in the top band would be blind remarked by external assessors. Booklet markings would be investigated. Self-revision forms submitted after the exam would be reviewed for coercion risk. The national seat decision would be delayed. Dr. Vey was recused from direct involvement due to a declared family connection.
Declared.
The word made my mother snort. He declared it after getting caught. Julian's name did not appear in any email. That absence said enough. I tried to study for my school finals, but my mind kept circling the same terror. What if they still found a way? What if they marked me down quietly? What if Julian's score rose? What if my refusal became forfeit? Rebirth had not made me fearless. It had made me familiar with the shape of the trap, which sometimes made waiting worse. At night, I dreamed of the stairwell, my hand slipping on wet marble, my mother waiting for an ambulance years later, Julian's policy report glowing on a government website like a polished weapon. The results were scheduled for Friday at noon. I spent the morning at school in Ms. Rao's classroom because my mother said if we waited at home, we would chew through the table. Ms. Rao pretended to grade essays while watching me refresh the portal every 30 seconds. Mara Quinn sat with me, though she did not know the whole story yet.
Mara had also sat the exam.
In the first life, she missed the regional list and later became a nurse. She used to say Northbridge was lucky it didn't get her. This time, she brought snacks and said, "Whatever happens, rich boys remain emotionally underdeveloped." At 12:03, the portal crashed. At 12:07, it loaded. My hands went numb. Candidate 4172, National Scholar seat offered. Raw score, 94. External moderated score, 95. Rank, 1. For a moment, I did not understand. The numbers were too clean, too visible, too impossible after a life where they had been buried. Rank 1. My score had not merely survived. It had improved by 1 point under external marking. Ms. Rao covered her mouth. Mara screamed. My mother, on speakerphone from the school parking lot because she had just finished a cleaning shift, said, "Say it." My voice broke. I got it. Say all of it. Rank 1. My mother made a sound I had never heard from her before, half sob, half laugh, something years of mopped floors and unpaid invoices and swallowed insults finally leaving her body. I pressed my forehead to the desk and cried while Mara pounded my back like I was choking. Ms. Rao wiped her eyes and said, "Check the public list." I did. There were 12 national names and 30 regional offers. Julian Vey was not listed. We learned the details 2 hours later, not officially. Nothing delicious ever arrives officially at first. Mrs. Alder called Ms. Rao from a block number and said the external marking summary had been posted for board members, then accidentally visible in the staff portal for 7 minutes. Julian's raw score was 82. The cutoff for the final national seat was 84. He failed by 2 points.
2.
Not 20. Not humiliating enough for everyone to agree he never had a chance. 2 points, the perfect distance between entitlement and evidence. He had passed the interview waiting in preliminary estimates, passed legacy leadership review, passed every invisible kindness built into the system, but under external blind marking and without my self-destruction lowering the cutoff, he missed. By 2 points. I sat with that number in my chest like a bell. In the first life, those 2 points had been taken from my future and handed to him wrapped in language about maturity. This time, they remained where they belonged, absent from his paper. Dr. Vey resigned from the admissions review panel the following week. The official statement cited family health matters and a desire to preserve confidence in the scholarship process. My mother taped it to the fridge beneath a magnet shaped like a tomato and wrote, "Confidence preserved by daughter of cleaner." Ms. Rao told her to stop annotating evidence copies. My mother said she had separate clean copies. I loved her so much it hurt. Northbridge announcer forms, no private post-exam candidate meetings, all candidate booklets scanned immediately after collection, no color-coded identifiers except approved accessibility tags, self-revision forms reviewed by independent officers, mandatory conflict declarations before the exam day. Boring reforms. Beautiful reforms. The kind of reforms no one applauds because they sound like paperwork until you know whose life once depended on the absence of them. Julian did not disappear. Boys like him rarely do. He sent me a message through the candidate forum 2 weeks after results. "I hope you're proud of what you did to my father." I stared at it for a long time. In my first life, I would have written a paragraph explaining myself, apologizing for his pain, proving my goodness to someone invested in misunderstanding it. This time, I screenshot it, forwarded it to compliance, and replied only, "Your score was your own." He blocked me. Good. Some doors improve when closed from the other side. Northbridge was everything I had dreamed and worse than I had imagined. The campus was beautiful in the way old money teaches bricks to look innocent. Ivy, courtyards, libraries with green lamps, dining halls where portraits of founders watch scholarship students learn which fork belonged to which course. I arrived with 2 suitcases, 3 printed evidence folders my mother insisted I keep, and a terror that everyone could smell I had entered through scandal. Some students knew me as rank 1. Some knew me as the girl from the Vey thing. Some smiled too brightly. Some avoided me, as if integrity might require paperwork they were not ready for. Mara Quinn received a regional place after the external review expanded the list. She arrived 3 weeks later and announced she was only there to keep rich people medically humble. We shared a room the first year. She snored. I loved her anyway. The program did not magically erase class. Nothing does. My coat was too cheap for winter. My laptop fan sounded like it was preparing for takeoff during seminars. I worked in the library cafe because scholarship stipends rarely understand laundry detergent. But every time I walked past the admissions building, I remembered the records room and did not shrink. Dr. Vey's portrait still hung in the administrative corridor for 1 semester, then vanished during renovations. Julian enrolled at another private institute through family connections. Rumor said he blamed stress, the external marking process, and me, in varying order depending on audience. Sometimes I saw his name in articles his father's friends wrote about, overcorrection in merit systems. I did not read them. My mother did, then called to summarize with unnecessary insults. He says exams cannot measure leadership, she said once. Maybe true. They measured his missing 2 points very well. I told her she was becoming petty. She said she had earned a hobby. Years passed. I studied public policy, transport equity, emergency systems, rural access, the subjects my exam essay had touched before I even understood they would become my life. I learned how models hide assumptions, how budgets pretend geography is neutral, how average response time can look excellent while specific communities wait twice as long. I learned that systems rarely fail everyone equally. They fail the people they were not built to see. Northbridge tried to teach leadership as polish. I learned it as refusal. Refusal to round down inconvenient suffering. Refusal to call rural delay an outlier. Refusal to let decision-makers use complexity as fog. My professors sometimes called me intense. I smiled and asked whether my calculations were wrong. Usually they were not. My mother died in the first life because Julian's transport reform ignored road closure patterns in poorer districts. In this life, she lived long enough to attend my graduation. She wore a navy dress borrowed from Ms. Rao and cried before the ceremony began because the chairs were too emotional. When I crossed the stage, she shouted my full name despite instructions to hold applause. Mara, seated 2 rows behind her, shouted, "Rank 1. The dean winced. I laughed so hard the official photo caught me with my mouth open. It is still my favorite picture. Afterward, my mother touched the diploma with 1 finger, as if checking whether expensive paper behaved differently. "Was it worth all that?" she asked softly. I thought of the first life, the stairwell, the stolen score, the years of shame. Then I looked at her, alive in sunlight. "Yes," I said, "but it should not have cost that much." She nodded. "Then make it cheaper for the next girl." So I did, or tried. I joined the Public Access Commission, then the Emergency Equity Unit, then eventually the National Transport Review Board. Not quickly. Not dramatically. Careers are mostly emails, drafts, meetings, edits, and the slow moral hazard of becoming the person who can postpone someone else's problem until next quarter. I kept my exam evidence folder in my desk drawer like a relic. When colleagues said a proposed reform was too complicated to audit, I remembered Dr. Vey's records room. When someone suggested discretionary review without oversight, I heard pastoral conversation and felt my blood cool. When a minister wanted to announce an emergency routing model before rural tests were complete, I asked what happened when the bridge on Westmere Road flooded at 2 a.m. and the nearest ambulance had to detour 26 minutes. The room went quiet. Good. Quiet is often the first honest sound. 10 years after the exam, Julian re-entered my life through a report draft. He had become a consultant for a private policy firm, polished and articulate, specializing in leadership resilience in public systems. His firm submitted a proposal for an emergency transport optimization contract. I read the methodology and felt the first life breathe down my neck. There it was again. Population-weighted access assumptions, road closures modeled as uniform delay, rural coverage aggregated into averages that hid the edges. Not as crude as before. He had learned, but not enough. Or perhaps he had learned how to hide weakness more elegantly. His name sat on the cover page beneath a silver logo. For a few minutes, I was 18 again, staring at a half-empty booklet and a man telling me Julian needed the door more. Then I opened the review template and wrote, "Rejected. Methodology fails equity stress tests. Rural transport assumptions invalid under flood closure scenarios. Resubmission requires disaggregated access modeling." I did not mention the past. The math was enough. Julian requested a meeting.
Of course he did.
We met in a glass conference room at the commission, not a records room. I brought 2 colleagues. He arrived in a tailored suit, older now, still handsome, but with a tightness around the eyes that had not been there at 18. "Leora," he said, as if we were old classmates with a complicated but charming history. "Ms. Elian is fine," I replied. His smile flickered. He began with pleasantries. I let them die. Then he leaned forward. "Your review seems unusually severe. The model fails the published criteria. Models can be refined." After rejection, yes. This contract would allow refinement during pilot. The pilot serves communities, not your methodology. His jaw tightened. For a second, the old boy appeared, the one by the exam steps asking, and as if my answer belonged to him. "You still hate me," he said quietly. My colleague shifted. I looked at him for a long moment.
No.
"I distrust your assumptions." That's a convenient distinction. It's the distinction your proposal failed to make. He flushed. "My father's career was destroyed over that exam. Your father pressured a candidate to falsify her own performance. He was trying to protect me from 2 points." The words landed. Julian looked away. There it was, the number between us small enough to fit in a margin, large enough to expose a family system.
"I was a kid," he said. "So was I."
He had no answer. For the first time, I saw something like understanding break across his face, unwelcome and late. "Did you know?" I asked. "That day. Did you know what he asked me?" Silence. He swallowed. "I knew he was going to talk to you. And after?" "I knew you withdrew part of your answer. And you accepted the seat." His face tightened. I wanted it. Honest, finally. Ugly, but honest. "Then understand this," I said. "Wanting something does not make another person responsible for disappearing." He stared at the table. "I know that now." "Good. Build better models." His firm did not get the contract. Another team did, one led by a woman from a regional emergency service who knew flooded roads, did not care about averages. Julian sent no further messages. Months later, I heard he had shifted into education philanthropy and publicly supported blind scoring reforms. People praised his growth. I did not clap, but I did not object. Sometimes people improve after consequence. Sometimes they simply learn better language. The record can decide over time. Northbridge invited me back to speak on the 15th anniversary of the marking reforms. I almost refused because the invitation used the phrase "from adversity to excellence," which made me want to throw a stapler. Mara convinced me to go. "Tell them adversity was not a scholarship category," she said. My mother, older now, hair silver, hands still restless even in retirement, said, "Wear the green suit. It makes you look like you charge interest." So I went. The exam hall had been renovated, but the rafters were the same. The banners were gone, replaced by plainer signs about integrity and access. Booklets were now scanned at collection. Candidate numbers were digitally randomized. No private meetings allowed. Mrs. Alder, retired, attended in the front row. Ms. Rao sat beside her. My mother sat beside Ms. Rao, holding tissues before anything happened. I stood at the podium where Dr. Vey once welcomed candidates and looked out at students younger than I had been when my life first split. People will tell you merit is a clean system, I began. It is not. People will also tell you merit is meaningless because systems are biased. That is not enough either. The question is not whether exams are perfect. They're not. The question is whether people with power can secretly move the result after the work is done. The hall was very quiet. Years ago, I sat an exam here. I was asked to lower my own score so a better connected candidate could pass. The request was dressed as kindness, maturity, institutional understanding, and concern for my future. It was none of those things. It was theft made polite. Mrs. Alder's eyes filled. My mother pressed a tissue to her mouth. I continued. A system is not fair because it uses numbers. It is fairer when the numbers cannot be privately rearranged by someone with a favorite child. After the speech, students lined up with questions. Some asked about policy. Some asked about scholarships. One girl waited until the room thinned. She wore a too large blazer and held her admission card in both hands. What if someone powerful says they're helping you understand reality? She asked. Her voice was small, but her eyes were steady. I thought of the records room, the self-revision form, my mother at the library printer, Julian's missing 2 points. Ask whose reality becomes easier if you obey, I said. She nodded slowly. And, if I'm scared, be scared with witnesses. That made her smile. It was not inspirational. It was better. It was usable. Before leaving, I walked alone to the old records corridor. The records room door was still there, though the room now stored scanning equipment and had a glass panel installed in the upper half. Transparency, made literal by renovation budget. I stood outside and looked through the glass at the shelves, the table, the place where Dr. Vey slid the form toward me. For years, I had imagined that room as the place where my life was stolen. Now it looked small. Not harmless. Small. That distinction mattered. The people who ask you to ruin yourself often rely on making the room feel larger than the world. It is not. There are doors. There are witnesses. There are printers in public libraries. There are mothers with red pens. There are retired invigilators who notice dots. There are teachers who know how to write dangerous emails. There are 2 points that refuse to appear on a boy's paper no matter how much his father needs them. My mother found me there. You okay? She asked. Yes. Really? I looked at the glass panel. Really? She stood beside me, shoulder touching mine. I used to clean this hallway, she said. I know. I used to think if I polished it enough, maybe the place would see us. My throat tightened. She smiled faintly. Turns out you made them look. I leaned my head against hers. You helped. Of course I helped. You think I raised a daughter to lose to a form? We laughed, and the sound echoed down the corridor where fear had once stood. People still tell the story simply. He told me to flunk it for his son. His son failed by 2 points. That is the satisfying version, the one that fits in a title, the one people repeat because the number feels like justice measured cleanly. But the truth is not only that Julian failed. The truth is that I almost failed myself for him. I almost mistook sacrifice for maturity because a powerful man praised me while holding a knife. I almost let my mother spend years believing we had not been enough. I almost let a flawed system gain one more polished heir and one more invisible girl. 2 points did not save me. Refusing to give mine away did. If you ask what revenge felt like, I will not say it felt like Julian's name missing from the list, though I remember refreshing the portal until my fingers shook. I will not say it felt like Dr. Vey resigning, though my mother's fridge annotation remains one of the great documents of modern justice. Revenge felt like a complete answer booklet sealed in front of a witness. It felt like my mother feeding coins into a library printer. It felt like Ms. Rao writing improper influence in an email subject line. It felt like Mrs. Alder saying, years later, I saw and thought, not this child. It felt like building policies where no one could be pulled into a quiet room after an exam and asked to become smaller for someone else's son. In my first life, I learned what happens when you let powerful people edit your score. In this life, I learned what happens when you make them read it. I sat my exam. I finished every answer. I did not submit the form. I did not flunk for Julian Bay. He missed by 2 points and the world did not end. Mine began.